Gonna maybe touch on that too, some of the interesting parts about that. But yeah, so what should we talk about? Fergus Falls. Talk a little bit about the history of how we got that started. There had been, I think, I've lived in Fergus now for about 6 years, and personally I've always been interested in, urbanism, biking, walking, issues like that. And very lucky to have somebody like Wayne in town, very similar, like mind, to bounce a lot of ideas off of. I think Fergus Falls, we really got our start after our first attempt at some kind of community organizing. There was a road project here in town, Fir Avenue, the one that runs along by Government Service Center, that you're familiar with. And they were resurfacing that, and we were hoping to get some bike lanes installed on that street. And we thought we did a fairly good job of laying out a vision and a plan. And this was really a sort of a ad hoc group of us that were interested in these issues thrown together. And we tried it out, and then we met some community resistance, and ultimately the lanes didn't get approved. There was sort of a compromise that was put in place that works for the most part, but we realized that after that, it was just a couple of neighbors who really got worked up about possibly losing parking. The plan was, just due to the width of the street, parking would have to be eliminated on one side of the street for the travel lanes and the bike lanes and everything to fit within the dimensions of the street, since they weren't moving the curbs or anything like that. So we thought we had a decent plan to shift parking just to one side, but there's one gentleman in particular who owned a large RV who liked to get it packed up and ready to go on the weekends, and he claimed he didn't have enough driveway space to park his RV in his driveway. And he got a few other neighbors involved, and they came to the city council meeting. That was enough, I think, to scare the city council into not wanting to proceed with it. But from that, we saw that we probably need to be a little bit more organized and focused in our efforts. So I think that next fall, that following fall, Fergus Falls was born. So we're just a citizen-driven advocacy group. We really have no official standing with the city, but we try to make recommendations when we can, and sort of stir the pot a little bit, and try to advance the issue of cycling and pedestrian. We're called Pedal, and we do a play on the word pedal, PED, in our logo to also emphasize the pedestrian aspect of our mission. I guess we have regular monthly meetings. We trying to set forth sort of a vision for what we see as the future of cycling and walking in Fergus Falls, trying to put together kind of a map of future potential bike routes, and then we're trying to tie that map back into existing construction projects that the city is undertaking. Just we're not really asking to go above and beyond a whole lot. We're just trying to fit in with existing maintenance that the city is trying to do on road projects. So we're somewhat successful at it. We're currently working right now on getting lanes painted on Cascade Street, which is a major north-south route through town that's undergoing a lot of construction. So we'll see how that ends up. So yeah, I don't know. Some of the challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges is as kind of a citizen-led group, we really are still missing somebody on the inside who's a dedicated advocate for this. Somebody on the city staff who really fights for a lot of bike and pedestrian issues. Larger cities have bike pedestrian coordinators. Fergus Falls isn't in that position, so you're asking the city engineer to start considering bike things. You're asking the city planner to start considering bike and pedestrian issues, and you would hope that they would do it as part of their normal job. That's just not. Sometimes that's not in their wheelhouse. It's not their main area of focus. So it's a bit frustrating, being on the outside and pushing for this change, but not having the day-to-day insider knowledge of what's going on and how to push the issue through through all the different wheels of government. So that's, I guess, one of the things that we still struggle with a little bit, and hope that we can improve on. And to that end, we do now have an officially recognized subcommittee that sits underneath the city governance structure. I'm on it, Patrick's on it, 3 other community members that are on it, and Wayne sits on it as the city council representative. So that's one channel that we hope. We only meet once a month. There's not a lot you can do in once a month for an hour and a half, but we are slowly, I think, making progress.
And is that separate from pedal? Fergus Falls. So Pedal Fergus Falls is not.
Yep.
So what's the name of that group under the city government?
We're BPAC, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and it's the source of endless confusion. Everybody mixes up Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee with Pedal Fergus Falls. But Pedal Fergus Falls is the citizen group, and BPAC is an official committee of the city. So.
Is there some crossover?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure.
I think all the BPAC members are Pedal Fergus Falls members.
Right.
But Wayne advised us that we shouldn't have more than two of our BPAC members at any given Pedal Fergus Falls meeting, because that constitutes a quorum then of a city body. And so we've been avoiding that. We sent Jake and Judy to the Pedal Fergus Falls meetings, and nowadays I'm staying out of them to avoid a quorum.
And that's a bad thing to do. I mean, it's still a pretty small pool, you know, so there's a ton of overlap. So that does, I think, in some ways hamstring the ability to get a lot of things done, because you kind of have to think about that and think about how, you know, who's going to be here, what can we talk about. So in some ways that's, you know, that's just kind of a problem with still sort of being a small movement, but hopefully we will have some grow out of that someday.
Can you talk a little bit about the bike-friendly community, you know, work that you've done, and then now I think you're looking at the pedestrian-friendly?
Right. Wayne's could talk a lot about that. He was involved in a lot of that effort.
Yeah, I could maybe address that. So actually the image on the screen is related to that. Basically, as Patrick talked about, we had a committee that we had formed to look at applying for bicycle-friendly community status through the League of American Bicyclists. And I'll maybe just hold it. So we had this committee that formed to look at this application, put the application together. We put the application together, and there are different levels that you can get if you get awarded bicycle-friendly community status. And so it's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's like the Olympics. There's bronze, silver, gold, and then they actually go beyond that. It's platinum and then diamond. And then below bronze, there's actually honorable mention. And then below that, there's like, you don't get anything. And that was what we got the first time, was the nothing, the big zilch. So we thought, well, you know, that's not a bad thing, because actually what the League of American Bicyclists does is they give you this really good feedback report. And so you get this feedback report, and we really took that to heart. And we took that feedback report, we said, okay, here's what they're recommending that we can do to start moving in a more positive direction to become a more bicycle-friendly community. And so we went through that, and that was actually how the BPAC formed. That was one of the recommendations that was in the feedback report, along with a number of other things. And so that was around the same time we got Pedal Fergus Falls organized, we got the city committee organized, and started to make some changes, and got a little bit of infrastructure in place with the sharrows downtown. So I don't know if folks know what sharrows are, but they're basically shared lane markings indicating that bicycle and motor vehicle would share the same space in the travel lane. And so we have sharrows right in the core of the downtown area. So we started to do some of those sorts of things. Decided, okay, now we felt like we were in a position to reapply for bicycle-friendly community status, and obviously we got it. So that photo is, go back one, Pat. So that's Mayor Hal Leland on the left, myself, obviously. Dave Sanderson, who is one of our two co-chairs for Pedal Fergus Falls, along with Eric Johnson. And then that's Dorian Grilly, who is the executive director of the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. And so Dorian came up to the city council meeting to present the award to us. So, and then Jason, you also asked about the pedestrian-friendly status. So we are currently in the process of putting together an application for a walk-friendly community status as well. So,
and who's that through?
That is through the Pedestrian and Bicycle Information Center. So it's a different organization, and I'm not sure exactly how that one's going to work. It'll be interesting to see. I'm hoping that we get a feedback report again, because I'm expecting that we may not get it the first time, but I'm hoping that we'll get that feedback report and then be able to do the same thing we did with the bike-friendly community status.
You know, what's pretty impressive is that cities don't like to add layers, so that you have this organization that's officially or not organization, the committee that's officially recognized by the city. That's huge. And that you even want to keep doing these applications, because none of them are simple. And so we go around, Patrick and I, mostly Patrick now, trying to convince cities that they should, or businesses for me, that they should apply. And they're thinking, well, why should we do one more thing? And so tell us, why should they do one more thing? Because we need some talking points
Yep.
to support this kind of work.
Well, I have a few thoughts on it. Maybe I'll pass over to Jake and see if he has some thoughts too. But when I look at a lot of this stuff, I tend to view a lot of this stuff through an economic development lens. And I know that's not necessarily what Partnership for Health's focus is, but that's a key selling point for especially locally elected officials. And I will tell you that this designation and doing all this work has put Fergus Falls on the radar. We get more press than we've ever had before. We show up on WCCO, and we have all these things going on that never would have happened had we not kind of achieved that bike-friendly thing. And so from an economic development perspective, that then, is something that we can point to say, hey, we've got all these things going on. And I can't say that that's the one thing. There's a lot of things that kind of go into the mix, but that's a huge one. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, we get a lot, like I said, a lot of press. I have people in the friends in the Twin Cities who say, we hear about Fergus Falls a lot, and we never used to. And a lot of it with biking, but then also other stuff too. I also had somebody, I think maybe some of you might know Ashley Hansen, but she did a Hinge artist residency. She was a participant in that program and was in Fergus Falls and actually worked on the Kirkbride Cycle play. And so Ashley told me a story that when she goes out and she does these plays around the state of Minnesota in rural communities, and she said that a lot of times, most of the time, she will ask them, what other community do you see yourselves kind of wanting to emulate? And more often than not, the answer was Lanesboro. And I don't know if folks are familiar with the story of Lanesboro, but they're like the trail mecca of the state of Minnesota. And people want to go to Lanesboro and they want to be like Lanesboro because they have all this stuff going on, cool shops and restaurants and bed and breakfasts, and there's all this neat stuff in their downtown and their community, and it's all centered around the Root River Trail. Ashley said that in the last year or two, that answer has changed from Lanesboro to Fergus Falls. And I was just absolutely floored by that because I didn't realize that Fergus Falls was on people's radar like that across the state. So that's, I guess, my answer to that. Karen, is that, I mean, it's just been a tremendous asset to the community just for publicity reasons, and it leads to all the other good things going on.
You initially started off your presentation there with economic development. So you're saying the bike trails, the pedestrian, it's an amenity that could get a person here.
Right.
It's an added plus is what you're...
Yep, absolutely.
And
yep.
I'm on the Detroit Lakes Development Authority too, and we have that same conversation regularly.
Yep.
The community center we built a decade ago, it wasn't, it's an amenity now.
Right.
In addition, we have this. We have the backyard. We have
Exactly.
Olympic-sized swimming pool. Those are all things that add to our workforce, people wanting to come there and work in it.
Exactly. It's just one more tool in the toolbox that we have, and it's one of those things that whether it's a company or an individual person that's looking at relocating to a community or moving to a community, they're going to say, what amenities do they have in this community? And this is just another significant one, in my opinion, that we can add and promote. So, you have anything? A little bit. I'm familiar with it. I've been involved to a degree, but I'm not on their committee or their working group.
Seems like
So.
that would support some of the walking.
Yeah, actually Lowell and Judy Carpenter.
People in the
Yeah.
orange shirt, yellow shirts.
Yeah,
up there.
so Lowell and Judy on the photo there. This is a photo from our 1-year anniversary for Pedal Fergus Falls, and you get to see it, Jason nice and right up front and center there. But Lowell and Judy are very directly involved in the North Country Trail effort, and as you can see, they're wearing Pedal Fergus Falls shirts, so they're involved with Pedal Fergus Falls also, and have been really helping a lot with the application. So yeah, we're definitely tying that in.
If I could just make one last comment here. Michelle Anderson, the lady on the right in that photo, she's joining this meeting later today, and we're going to talk about all those photos in the back there. But I just want to give Jay credit. As I understand it, you were the computer guy and the JPEG file printing guy for all of these giant photos in the windows.
Yeah, no, I think that was Kinko's actually who did that. But
She said something, you set up the website then.
I helped a little with some of that, yeah. But yeah, Mary there in the front was a visiting artist, and she had a lot of projects that centered around bicycling in town, and she really gave us a shot in the arm. I think she showed up in April, May was kind of around during that time, and it was March and April, I think, and it was really nice to get to some fresh outside blood in, and some new energy and some new ideas. And those pictures are still on display downtown. If you happen to drive through downtown before you leave today, take a look. It's a pretty neat display.
One of the photos is of Wayne, right, and your family, right?
Well, one's of me by myself, one is of my daughter and her 2 friends.
Okay, and then Jake,
And then
you
Jake's,
gotta be in at least
yeah.
one of these, right?
Yeah, I'm in one with my daughter, then my son's featured in one of them as well. Yeah.
And one thing Jake hasn't mentioned at all is the walking school bus, which is where I first kind of met you too when you were involved with that. You still do that?
Well, not
really?
well. I would, but with the way schools are set up here in town, they go to different schools for different grade levels. So now we moved. My son now, who's going into 3rd grade, is moving to a school that's a little bit farther away, probably practically not in practical walking distance on most of our mornings. Probably we'll start biking there. And then as far as the bus aspect of it, I'm not a huge fan of biking with a whole bunch of little kids in tow. I can handle him and maybe one other kid, but I do have a daughter who's 1, so when she gets to be school age and gets back to the neighborhood school that's by our house, we'll start it back up again for a couple of years. But yeah, that was a whole other thing that was very, very much fun to do. I'm looking forward to doing it again, and something I hope more communities could consider doing.
And one thing that has changed now because of the way the schools have set up their boundaries, so now you can't always be at a school nearby your house, so it's not always walkable, which is,
Right.
to me as a parent, that would be concerned.
Yeah, and that kind of gets to the health inequity or systems
Yes.
that change in our community that don't allow us to be as healthy as we want. So awesome, thank you. Any other questions for either one of those gentlemen? Okay.
Well, I have a quick one. How did that big event downtown yesterday, where you were biking and skateboarding and all that? Were you invited to that?
Yeah, well, I was mostly occupied at the road race, but Wayne was actually more involved at the rest of the events, so he could probably speak to that better than I can.
Yeah. Overall, I think it went very well. We were involved, we were focused mostly on the Fergus Falls booth, so to speak, but we had the school's bike fleet with the trailer there, which was provided by Partnership for Health, and so that was a great thing to have down there because the trailer is just so visible. And I don't know if folks have seen that trailer or any of the other trailers, but they're all just they're just decorated in such a way that they're just really eye-catching. And so we were down on the one end. It was basically a 3-block section that they had closed off for this event called Shop, Move, and Groove, and we were down on the one end, and we had, I'd say, a fair amount of traffic. I think that it met expectations at the very least. It did wrap up a little bit early from what I heard. I actually had to go because I was helping with the race also.
Because it rained.
Do you think that was why? Yeah, there was a little rain shower that came through, and I guess everybody scattered and then they didn't come back because it was late enough in the day that it was going to be wrapping up soon anyway. So it did get cut short a little bit, but it overall, I mean, I think the day went very well. So, yeah.
And Shop Moving Group is like the spin-off of this Streets Alive. It's one on.
Yeah, it's basically it's a combination of the old Crazy Days event and then like an Open Streets event. So they kind of merged the two. So I think it went pretty well.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to mention real quickly about the bike fleet, there is one in Detroit Lakes, Fergus Falls, Moorhead, and Breckenridge. So if you're from those communities and want to check them out and use them, they are available.
And Battle Lake and Durham are sharing with too.
Thank you.